And we are live with another episode of Drafting Lessons, the DLF TV show where I grab a guest every single week and we run through either a Dynasty startup or some rookie mocks. So because we're only 2.5 weeks away from the NFL draft and I've been doing rookie mocks for the past couple weeks, I decided to do another 2 rookie mocks today. And I'm joined by Garret Price at Dynasty Price on Twitter. How's it going, man?
Dude, it's going good, man. It's going good. I always love extra excuses to draft. It seems like no matter how many leagues you're in, you still want to draft more. So I was excited when I got the opportunity to do this.
Alrighty, yeah, definitely. I know it's this, especially with the quarantine and everything right now. Everybody's got that drafting issue because there's nothing else to do.
Exactly.
So to prevent you from joining another league, we're just going to be doing 2 4-round rookie mocks here. The first one will be out of the 2 spot, the 102, 202, and then so on. And then the second one will be out of the 8 spot, 108, 208, and so on. So we're going to get a good amount of rookie talk going on here. And I think we're just going to dive right into it and see where we're at whenever we get on the other side of the 102. All right.
Perfect. Now this is 1 QB, right?
1 quarterback. Yep. 1 quarterback, regular PPR, no premiums or anything. It's just straight normal stuff.
All right. Plain Jane. I love it.
All righty. So we're going to get right into it here. All righty, Garret, we are on the clock, 102, and Jonathan Taylor went 101, which I think is going to be pretty stereotypical, pretty consensus for a lot of rookie drafts. So we're here now at the 102 with everybody else. You have your pick. So what's it going to be?
Yeah. So there's 2 places that I would strongly consider going. And pre-landing spot, it's going to be tough to know which one I really truly like more because it's a 1A, 1B thing for me. So basically it's going to come down to J.K. Dobbins or DeAndre Swift. We know that there's kind of a tier of 3 guys at running back that all look like they could end up being potential studs, RB1s for your team. And then depending on who you talk to, there's 2 more guys in Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Cam Akers that could also fall into that spot. But it really comes down to Dobbins and Swift for me. And right now I'm going to go with J.K. Dobbins. He is actually my RB1 in the class. Now, I know that is not the popular choice overall. A lot of people, love Jonathan Taylor, love Swift. I've even seen some people lately hyping up CD maybe as, a 101. But I think in most cases you're going to see Jonathan Taylor or Dobbins. So for me, what I love about J.K. Dobbins is the true 3-down skill set. I don't have any concerns in the passing game. That literally the only thing that I see is like a true question mark in his game is there was some real inconsistencies in pass protection, which doesn't necessarily hurt you for fantasy football, but it does, limit some of your opportunities to get on the field. So he's going to need to clean that up a little bit. But overall, I think there's not a landing spot outside of, something disastrous that I could think of that would turn me off of him. I think he's pretty safely locked into my top 3 and most likely my 101, depending on where Swift and Taylor end up.
So I got 2 questions for you here with this J.K. Dobbins pick. The first one, you said he's your RB1 in this class and you're most likely 101. So what is the difference for you between Dobbins and the consensus 101 and RB1 Jonathan Taylor?
So the difference for me, there's a few things. It's not that I don't like Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is a fantastic athlete, a fantastic runner, and could, depending on landing spot, end up being that top guy for me. The difference right now is we haven't seen as much of him in the passing game. Doesn't mean he can't do it. We've seen that a lot in Wisconsin where, running backs don't get as much opportunity there, but still end up being fine. But there were some inconsistencies in the passing game for him that I saw. But for me, it's even more so than that, more so than the fumbling. It comes down to, I think he's the most landing spot dependent of the big 3. The reasoning is Dobbins and Swift are much better at being able to create behind the line of scrimmage. if Jonathan Taylor does not have a good offensive line, I'm not sure that he's going to be able to create plays before the line of scrimmage like the other two will be able to. Now, if he gets with like the Colts or he gets, somewhere with like a really good offensive line, he's going to feast. He gets with the Niners. He's going to absolutely feast. But it's very dependent on him being able to get that head of steam and be able to get that one cut and go, because once he goes, he's tough to bring down because he's a strong runner. And dude's freaking fast. Like in the open field, you're not catching him. So that's what it comes down to for me is, where does he end up going? Is it a Niners? Is it a Colts? In that case, he probably does end up being my 101. But if it's somewhere that's less than ideal, if he ends up in Miami, he ends up in Tampa Bay, he ends up in a situation like that, I'm a little more nervous, and I think Dobbins and Swift have a lot more upside.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense, and it's a great argument for it, and something that I hadn't really considered beforehand, the fact that Jonathan Taylor is a little bit more offensive line dependent, even though I've seen, other remarks about how, a lot of his rushing ability was based off of his offensive line being able to create for him versus Taylor having to do a lot more of the work. So that's definitely an interesting, situation and an interesting argument there for you. So I'm going to have to pay attention to that come draft day. My second question for you is, I think that at the 102, it opens up a lot more the possibility of taking a wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb, Jared Doody, specifically the two consensus wide receivers in this class. Going running back early there, is that a personal preference, or you just like the prospect of J.K. Dobbins a lot more than the wide receivers, or is that like a dynasty build? What is that for you there?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things that go into this. So for what we're seeing in this class is wide receiver is crazy, crazy deep. So the chances are, if you're at 202, the wide receiver that you're going to get is going to be a top 7 or 8 guy in most classes overall. So the value's there. Whereas with the running back position, the value isn't as much there after you get past the top 5. There's a 6th guy I really like. And we'll talk about him in a second. Oh, he's rated higher than I expected him to be, which is disappointing. But yeah, so I think the player that you're going to get there too, but also thinking from a dynasty build, we know a lot about the wide receivers in the 2021 class as well. So we're looking at more talented wide receivers coming out next year. Whereas the running back class, there was a couple good players that went back, but it looks like the running back position once again will probably be a little depleted. And so it's a little bit easier to draft your running backs, trade for your wide receivers. Overall, I do like to go best available player. So if there was a wide receiver that I thought clear, hands down, was going to be a better fantasy producer than any of those running backs, then I would still go best available. But I think it's very close between CD and those guys. And so for me, with all of those other factors, that's enough to make sure that I take that running back.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely makes sense. And you're in the consensus there with a lot of people having those 3 running backs, Taylor, Dobbins, and Swift, in whatever order as their first 3 picks in rookie drafts. So getting back to the draft here, we're on the clock at the 202. The rest of the first round went, pretty – holy crap, never mind. Donovan Peoples-Jones snuck into the 112. I don't know where that came from, considering that last week he was in like the 3rd round. I don't know. So I don't know what happened there. But anyway, the other 11 picks were pretty typical in terms of the first round. And then Joe Burrow went at the 201. So we're now here at the 202. Denzel Mims, Laviska, Tua, Michael Pittman, Brandon Ayuk, Keyshawn Vaughn, Brian Edwards, KJ Hamler, Zach Moss, to give you a layout of the land here. So what are we looking at here? 202.
I was hoping Keyshawn Vaughn would be a little bit lower on their rankings. I'm glad to see people are hip to it, but that's going to make it harder for me to get him where I would want to get him. And he's with all of these running backs. So after these top 3 guys, and probably Akers and Clyde Edwards-Helaire as well. After that, it's going to be very dependent on landing spot and draft capital. So you could tell me that Keyshawn Vaughn goes to the Chiefs in the 3rd round, and all of a sudden he's a top 5 pick. You could tell me Keyshawn Vaughn goes in the 5th round to the Jets, and all of a sudden it's like, that hurts. So I love him as a prospect. But it's too much. If I'm drafting before the actual NFL draft, it makes me a little bit more nervous to take him, to take Zach Moss, to take like some of those next, those third tier running backs. I'm a little more leery of doing that. And so I'm actually probably taking the top rated player on the board. I'm taking Denzel Mims. Watching his tape, I was blown away. So I had seen a little bit on him, but I hadn't done like a good deep dive into him. And then he blew up at the combine, and I was like, holy cow, like I clearly have not done enough homework, because this guy looks incredible. And all of the nuances in his route running, he's a very intelligent wide receiver. He uses his hands really, really well. And when I say that, I don't just mean at like the catch point or things like that, but uses his hands against the defensive back. He's very sly. He probably should get more pass interference calls than he does, because he's very sly with how he uses his hands. Incredible catch radius. I mean, the balls that he's able to snag out of the air, left, right, up, down, it doesn't really matter. He's able to go get it. Those real long arms. So I'm very excited about him. And I actually think there is a very, very real possibility that he gets taken in the first round of the NFL draft. And at that point, it's going to be hard not to take him in the first round of your fantasy draft. I would not be shocked at all to see Green Bay go Denzel Mims at 30.
Actually, yeah, now that you say that, I have seen that in a lot more recent mocks. Mims slide in there at the back the back end of the first round of the NFL draft. And if that happens, I think that props him up pretty firmly into the first round of rookie drafts.
Probably.
So let me ask you about Mims, because I believe it was 2 weeks ago when I did this with Jesse Reeves. He also picked Mims in around the same spot here. I believe we had the 203. I think he took Mims at 203.
Okay.
And I asked him the question I'm going to ask you as well too, is Mims is a guy that, so personally, I don't really watch college football. I'm a Penn State fan, been a Penn State fan my entire life.
Sure.
And I graduated from there, love Penn State football. I love KJ Hamler, all about that. But outside of Penn State and some of like the Big Ten as well too, I'm not a college football watcher, so I don't really know these people's names. But, being in fantasy football and being around other people who talk about this, I know all these other guys as well. But Mims was a guy that I had never heard of until the NFL Combine, when he blew up and had a fantastic performance. So why did he fly so under the radar all the way up until the NFL Combine? And are you nervous that the Combine boosted his stock more so than it probably should have, even though it's going to help his landing spot, which in turn is going to help in terms of his fantasy production?
So for me, there's a lot of good questions in there. So the reasons I think he flew under the radar, there was a lot of stuff to process just now. I was like, oh, okay.
Sorry.
No. It was all good questions. So there's a few things. One, Baylor isn't one of your Oklahomas, your Alabamas, your Ohio State. Like, it's not this like huge name school. So I think that was part of it. Two, in the Baylor offense, traditionally, we've seen guys put up really good numbers. So if you're not digging into the tape and just looking at numbers, you're like, oh, another Baylor receiver with good numbers. Like, what a surprise. Because that happens seemingly on a regular basis, is they just put up really good numbers. It's a very pass-friendly offense. So that's not a surprise to see those types of numbers. And three, I think it just speaks to the depth of this wide receiver class, because there was just so many guys that needed to be evaluated, that there's only so many hours in the day, there's only so much opportunity, and so you're looking at all of these guys, and it's easy to watch one quick game on a guy and, okay, he looks good, he maybe he might be a second, third round guy, like I like him, and move on and not really like dig deep into him. And so I think what can be dangerous is kind of that combine boost. And for me, I don't necessarily move a player up or down in because of the combine if they test relative to what I expect. So like Jonathan Taylor is a perfect example. If you knew and you kind of paid attention, you did Devy stuff, or you're an NFL draft guy or a big college fan, you knew more than likely Jonathan Taylor was going to be around a 4.4, maybe sub 4.4. You kind of knew that. He ran roughly what we expected. So people afterward are freaking out and moving him up their board, when in reality, that's where we thought he was going to run it going in. So I didn't adjust it based on that. Only if somebody did significantly better or significantly worse would I move them up. So that really fell into the lap of two players for me, Denzel Mims and Chase Claypool. So those were two guys I had to look because they tested significantly better than I thought they would. For me, then when I went back, dug into the tape, Mims moved up significantly because I had him rated too low. I did not understand his athletic ability. I did not realize what he could do. Chase Claypool, I didn't end up really moving at all. He was still kind of what I thought he was on tape. It seemed like that athletic testing was more of an outlier, more of a, looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane kind of deal. I still wasn't impressed after going back. So Denzel Mims was far and away the biggest winner of the combine for me, just because I think it opened up a lot of people's eyes to really how talented this kid was.
Yeah, that's a fantastic explanation for it. And I think Mims is a guy who benefited from the combine in a positive way, in that he's now ranked where he probably should have been the entire time, more so than double counting the combine and, adjusting for, profile and athleticism that we should have already seen coming and should have already known that they had, like you said. So that was a fantastic explanation there. So we're just going to move right on. We're just going to move right on to the 302 here. In terms of the second round, a lot of wide receivers again. A.J. Dillon, Zach Moss, and Keyshawn Vaughn went in the second round of the second half of the second round. And then Bryson Hopkins has entered as the only tight end off the board. And then Tua went at the end of the second. And then Eno Benjamin at the 301. So 302 here, we're looking at Justin Herbert, Tyler Johnson, AGG, Anthony McFarland, Antonio Gibson, Hurts and Love at quarterback, Hunter Bryant, Devin Duvernay, Cole Kmet, Albert O. Darrington Evans is still down there. That's Ray's boy from last week. Yep. Where are we looking at here?
So this has been the toughest decision so far, because we've clearly entered into kind of the tons of upside, but where are they going to go in the draft? What kind of team? Much more team-dependent players overall, draft-dependent players overall. So what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to take the one that I believe will be the most safe out of all of these guys that I can get value out of almost no matter what. And I'm actually going to go Cole Kmet here. I actually believe he's the top tight end in this class. Definitely as far as NFL draft terms go, I think he will be the first one off the board. And I expect him to be a top 50 or 60 pick. So I think he'll go probably mid-second round if I had to guess today, which I think will be the highest draft capital out of any of these guys. I think he also has the chance to become the guy that we all covet, the George Kittles, the Gronks, the Travis Kelce. He has the highest likelihood to develop into that because he's got the size, the build, and some of the ability to be able to be an inline blocker like we would like to see him do. But he's got the athleticism to be flexed out and play that stand-up Y position and run some stuff out of the slot that we saw, Gronk do so successfully over the years. I think I'm not saying that he's going to be able to enter the echelon of those three guys, but if there was anyone in this class that could, I think he would be the guy. So there's some upside there, but I think worst case scenario, I think he will be the starting tight end of his football team wherever he ends up going for the foreseeable future. And so I know that I'll be getting value there at a 302. It just, it's a question of, will it be like it's okay, he's my tight end too, and he's got some upside on bye weeks, or does he end up really becoming that guy and enter that top 8, top 6 tight end threshold?
In terms of comparing him to tight ends from past drafts, right? So where would you have Cole Kmet in terms of rankings versus, TJ Hawkinson, who's gained a lot of value over the past year, as well as Noah Fant, and then, versus, other guys like Mike Gesicki and stuff like that. How do you see Kmet comparing to those other guys, young tight ends who have gained pretty significant value over the past year, for Dynasty purposes?
Yeah, I definitely, as a pure prospect, I definitely would have TJ Hawkinson ahead of him coming out. I think him and Fant would probably be pretty close. I probably would have had Jaceki over both of them. So yeah, I think he's right in the Noah Fant range. I was a little bit lower on Fant than others. So that's not saying that he should be, end of the first round pick for rookie drafts like Noah Fant was last year, because he tended to live right around that, pick 112 range, it seemed like, in last year's draft. I don't know that I would have had Cole Kmet up quite that high, but I also wasn't picking Fant in that range. I was picking Fant more in like the 15, 16, 17 range, which means I never got him. So I don't own him anyway. So I think Cole Kmet would be pretty close to that area. So like if I really needed to, which I try not to draft based on need, I try to go best player available regardless. But if somebody could talk me into taking Cole Kmet at the end of the second round, if they were super, super needy for a tight end.
So based on Kmet being taken now here at the end of the third round, and Hopkins was taken at 209, is that more so based on how good the rest of this class is, or maybe how bad the tight end class is overall, that we've seen these tight ends, because based on past rookie drafts from past years, like you said, Fant and Hawkinson were back end first, early seconds. I remember OJ Howard was, a back end first as well too. Mike Gesicki was an early second or mid second at worst. And we're not really seeing that with this tight end class, with these tight ends specifically. Is that like I said, is that more so the tight ends, or is that just how good the rest of the class is above them?
I think it's a little bit of both. To be honest. We have so many talented wide receivers in this class. And a good solid second tier of running backs. Like I said, they're going to be really dependent on where they go, but a really good second tier of running backs. And then you have some really solid quarterbacks as well. So with the tight end class being a little bit weaker, and not nearly as deep, honestly, Cole Kmet and Bryson Hopkins and some of those guys, I could see them falling even further if it wasn't for the fact that there's just not a lot of decent tight ends to go off of. You got, depending on who you ask, some people will say, man, there's only 2 good tight ends in this class. Some people will say 5. Some people will say that there's only 2, but they disagree with the other guy that said there are 2 as to which the 2 good ones are. And so it somewhat depends too if you're more of a film guy or an analytics guy, because that'll change who your favorite tight end is based on that a little bit too. So there's a lot of different things here, but overall, I do think it speaks mostly to the tight end class being a little bit weaker.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. So last pick here in this first 4-round rookie mock, we're at the 402. Again, a lot of wide receivers are starting to go here as well. Darrington Evans went at 305. Albert O as another tight end went off the board at the end of the third. Personally, my favorite tight end in this class. And then, so now entering the 4th round, Josh Kelly went at the 401. And we're now looking at still quarterbacks Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, Hunter Bryant, Lynn Bowden Jr., LaMichael P. Ryan, Colin Johnson, Jake Fromm, Van Jefferson, Thaddeus Moss, Adam Troutman, Jacob Eason, Harrison Bryant. This is a lot of quarterback tight end territory here. So where are we looking at here for the 402? And if I didn't scroll down far enough for your guy, just let me know.
No, you did. You scrolled down far enough for my guy. For anybody that's followed me on Twitter, they know that there's probably one player that I've hyped up more than most of the players that I've hyped up, and that's DJ Dallas out of Miami. So he is. I'm not quite sure why he's been so severely underrated. The production was a little bit lower. Now there was a little bit of injury, and that Miami offense was pretty bad. But watching his tape has been an absolute joy. He is far and away some of the best contact balance in this class. The only ones that I would say would rival him would be those top tier guys. Those are the only ones that I would say are as good or better than DJ Dallas. After those top tier guys, he's got the best contact balance in the class. He has, regardless of the position, I actually have him as my highest rated pass blocker and pass protection in the class, which is something that I was excited to see Daniel Jeremiah talk about him, because he had the same same note of, he's a really good in pass protection. Teams are going to want to utilize him on the field because of that. But he came in, he played quarterback in high school. He switched and was recruited as a wide receiver to Miami. Then they converted him from a wide receiver to a running back. And he also played special teams where he returned kicks. So this guy did a little bit of everything. And I think teams are going to love that. And he's a great personality as well to insert to your team. Just hey, I'll do whatever to play. I'm a workhorse. I'm a football guy. Like that's kind of his mentality. And so I think there's going to be a team that falls in love with him. But like I said, with all of these running backs, and I'm going to repeat it ad nauseum, it's still going to come down to draft capital, and we'll see where he ends up going. So as of right now, I like him enough to take him there. And actually, I would even take him higher than that. I just don't think it'll be necessary anywhere to do that. But we'll have to see where he ends up getting drafted.
So where do you see him ending up being drafted that would make you pick him in the third round, or maybe might boost his value into the third round?
Yeah, so there's a few places that I think he could end up and carve out a nice role early on. My gut is he doesn't get a starting gig early. I'm guessing he's either some sort of a committee or a backup running back with an opportunity to gain some ground. So somewhere like New York Jets would be good. We don't know how long Le'Veon Bell would be there. He can do some stuff out of the backfield, pass catch, all of that kind of stuff. I know we don't love Gase, but my guess is Gase is gone after this year. Fingers crossed. So that would be a good landing spot. Apparently, he has done some pretty intensive interviews with both Tampa Bay and Miami. I anticipate both of those teams taking a running back earlier than him. But if they decide to go another direction, all of a sudden he's got a real good shot to earn a job. Jordan Howard's in Miami right now. That shouldn't be someone that difficult to compete with. At least work out a third down role at worst case scenario there. Or Tampa Bay, him and Ronald Jones. So those would be some places that I think would make a lot of sense. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm much higher on him than consensus. And so I think I'll probably have him in most of my leagues.
Yeah. All righty. So that completed the first 4-round rookie mock draft. That was out of the 2 spots. So we're going to switch it up now, and we are going to go out of the 8 spot here and do 108, 208, and so on here. So everything is good settings wise, and we're just going to get right into it.
Right into it. Let's do it.
Alrighty. This is all. I always think this second one is much more interesting because we're talking about a completely different set of players,
right?
In all the rounds, and they're not as consensus, and there's a lot of different things that you go in. And so I'm interested to see where you decide to go here at the 108 after the first 7 picks of Jerry Jeudy, Jonathan Taylor, Swift, Dobbins, CeeDee Lamb, Edwards-Helaire, and then Henry Ruggs. So we are now here at the 108, and this has been basically a pretty similar situation to what Jesse and Ray both found themselves in the past 2 weeks. We drafted out of the 7 and the 10. So this is pretty wide receiver heavy here for the back end of the first. I'm very interested to see if you decide to go Cam Akers here, who is still available, or one of these wide receivers. So what are we looking at here?
This is a really, really tough one for me. I do like Cam Akers quite a bit. I do think he's a very talented back, and I think he's going to find himself taken somewhere in the second round of the real NFL draft. And obviously that's an opportunity to get to play pretty early on. So, but the tough part is I think T. Higgins is very underrated for the class. I know some of his athletic measurables lately have been less than ideal, but all he's done is dominate. Jalen Reagor is a stud as well. I'm not quite as high on Justin Jefferson as other people. So he's a fine player and should go in the first round, if not early second round. But I don't know that I'll have a ton of shares. So really, I think what it's coming down to is Cam Akers and Jalen Reagor for me, and I'm probably going to end up going Cam Akers. I think the value is just too good there at the 108 to pass on. And anytime that you get a running back that could be a feature running back for a team, and if you're drafting one in the top 2 rounds, that's more or less what you're expecting, is that guy to be your feature back, or at least the lead dog in a committee. And so even though there is some concerns with, some of the bad habits he picked up playing behind that putrid offensive line, there are some questions about his vision. He's another one that's newer to the position after, being a quarterback in high school and then switching to running back. So there's more question marks with Akers than some. But I also think the ceiling is incredibly, incredibly high, as he, outside of Jonathan Taylor, is probably the most physically gifted of this group. So I'm very happy to get Akers at 108, and I think that's a good value.
So what do you make about all the people? Because Akers seems to be a very divisive running back in this class, especially when you're talking about, this, end of the first tier, beginning second tier running backs here. I mean, what do you make about all of the stats that show, his offensive line was absolutely horrendous, and all of his yards, except for like 2, came after contact or what have you, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, does that play at all a role into any of your analysis here, or are you just looking at, what is Cam Akers' skill set, and, assuming that he lands in a pretty favorable condition in which that team is going to be able to utilize that skill set to maximize his production, that you're then comfortable with taking him at the 108 there?
So when I look at these players, I do my best, and it's impossible to do it 100%, but I do my best to remove the external circumstances of their team and what's going on there. I try my best to remove that. And like I said, it's impossible to do it 100%, but you have Cam Akers, who, like we said, talent-wise, we believe is one of the more talented backs in the class, and was in a putrid situation. Whereas really the other 4 running backs were all in very, very favorable situations. And so what you have to do is you have to look at the skill set of what they're bringing to the table. You have to watch, what do they do when the play breaks down? Because even on the best teams, there are still plays that break down. What do they do? How's their vision downfield? When they reach, when they get contact, do their legs still churn, or do they stop moving? Do they, so there's still traits regardless of the overall situation that you can still say, yes, this player has what it takes, or no, it doesn't. It does make it more difficult to evaluate that on terrible teams, because you pick up some bad habits at times. But overall, I think that the skill set that he has is strong enough to be able to be successful in almost any situation.
All righty. Yeah, I like that. That's a different player that we've had in this situation here. So I like having the diverse opinions for these later round picks. And I'm not against taking Akers at the back half of the first round if he falls there. Yep. Landing spot dependent, but we'll see. I'm so excited for this NFL draft. It's going to be so much fun.
It's going to be so great. I can't wait.
Yeah. So we are on the clock, 2:08 now. Again, so the rest of the first round went, I think, much more consensus. I'd rather see Dylan there than Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's just me. And then Jefferson went at 201, Burrow at 202, and Tua at 206, and then a whole bunch of the wide receivers here. So 208, we're still looking at Brandon Ayuk, Keyshawn Vaughn, Bryan Edwards, Justin Herbert at quarterback, Tyler Johnson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Eno Benjamin as another running back there, and AGG, Anthony McFarland. So what are we looking at here, Garrett?
Man, I got another tough call. This one is clear-cut 2 players for me. It's Keyshawn Vaughn and it's Bryan Edwards. Really, really like both of these players. Keyshawn Vaughn, similar situation as Cam Akers, actually. Vanderbilt was absolutely putrid this past year. Basically no help. Their quarterbacks combined on the season, and yes, there were multiple quarterbacks that played for them, combined for 10 passing touchdowns on the season. So, I mean,
that's good.
yeah, they're not slinging it. The offensive line wasn't very good. The guys that we thought were playmakers outside of Vaughn did not make any plays. And so it was really, he was the entire offense. The negatives on him, are the biggest one is honestly his age. He's a 5th-year senior. And so that's something that, when you look at the longevity of his career, running backs, it's already a shorter shelf life. He does have that 5th year. So he's already 23. And I think he'll be 23 for a majority of the season, of the NFL season. But, you have other guys coming in here at the age of 21. So, you do have to factor that in. But for the most part, for running backs, I'm only looking at their first contract anyway. Anything they give me beyond their first contract, I consider a bonus, because I'm really only concerned with those first 4 or 5 years. Bryan Edwards, the crazy, absurd early breakout age. How you break out at 17 doesn't even make sense to me, because by the time I graduated, like I was 18 and like I had one of those summer birthdays. So I was almost 19. So I was like one of the oldest ones in my class. So like, how are you in college playing football at age 17? Makes no sense to me. But he was still able to play very well for South Carolina at such an early age. Very consistent, all-time leading receiver in yards and catches, and I think he's second in touchdowns, or he's a leader in 2 of them, and he's in second place in one of those. But very, very good career there. We do have the injury that he just sustained with the foot, so we didn't get to see him test at the combine. He didn't end up getting to do anything at the Senior Bowl. But all of my tape evaluation has been very, very positive. He is more of your contested catch, your possession receiver, more so than some of these guys that rely more on the separation. He doesn't necessarily need the separation, but the NFL seems to be trending in a direction where they value separation receivers more than they do contested catch, Des Bryant type of players. So I'm gonna go with Keyshawn Vaughn, and this is a heart pick. It could have gone either way. And it's risky because he could end up being a 4th round pick in an unfavorable situation. And then that really makes it a tough uphill climb for him. There were positive and negatives to both those players, but I liked their tape enough in both cases. Look, they went back to back. Makes perfect sense. I would have been happy either way, but I think I like Keyshawn Vaughn just a hair more than I like Bryan Edwards.
Yeah, so speaking in terms of Bryan Edwards, at least for me, so I think that the injury and actually, I mean, we can see it right now. He's going to the back half of the second, and I think it's created a very nice buy low opportunity on him, because I definitely see Edwards as a guy who could be a top 5 wide receiver in this class. Had he tested and had he shown that, all the athletic measurables that I think a lot of people expected him to show. And like you said, when you combine that with his analytical profile, a 17-year-old breakout age, which is insane. And you mean, when you just compare it to 18-year-old breakout ages, that's just, it's fantastic for him. So I'm really interested to see where he ends up going, specifically to what team, because I think he's going to have really good draft capital, even though I think he'll probably be like a 3rd round pick, or maybe 4th round at the absolute latest, but I think he'll be there. And then Keyshawn Vaughn, I mean, in terms of that pick right there, so I've seen a lot of people have Keyshawn Vaughn ranked anywhere from like 4 to 8 in terms of RBs in this class. I mean, you've already touched on it a couple of times in terms of where his landing spot is going to be very crucial, because he could have a very late round capital or a pretty early capital to a pretty favorable spot. But I mean, for me personally, I would really like to see him go to a place where he can kind of compete with the starting running back and not necessarily gain the starting role, but in a place where he's already going to have immediate
impact.
Look.
Yeah.
Yes. Like a place like Buffalo, for example, kind of comes to mind when I think of a good opportunity for that, where, he can come in and compete with Singletary, and he might not win the job, but he'll be there and he'll kind of do, kind of this like Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams kind of thing going on for his upside. And then if injuries happen, that's kind of where we're at. But I wasn't aware that he was 23. He turns 23 at the beginning of May.
Okay.
But yeah, he'll be 23 to start the season, 24 in year 2. That's already a big time yikes for me.
For sure. That definitely hurts.
Yeah. But I mean, I like the pick a lot. I've seen Keyshawn Vaughn go a lot in the back half of the second round, and I'm definitely about that pick there. And I think we've talked about him pretty well for for both drafts specifically. So we're on the clock now, 3:08. We're looking at again, quarterback Justin Herbert, Tyler Johnson, Antonio Gibson, Hunter Bryant, Jordan Love, Cole Kmet is still there at the back half of the third. Devin Duvernay, Lynn Bowden, Darren Evans. What are we looking at here, Garrett?
So in real life, I'm probably taking Cole Kmet. I mean, I was willing to take him at the 302. I'd be willing to take him at the 308. But for the sake of mixing it up a little bit and not talking about the same player again, I'll go different. I'll go a different route. I'm going to take Justin Herbert here. Right now, we're hearing a lot of rumors about teams falling in love with Justin Herbert. Is there, I think it was, who was it? Monday Morning Quarterback that put out this crazy scenario how Cincinnati could, trade with Miami, and Miami trades the farm to come up and get Burrow. They trade back to 5 and get Justin Herbert, who's a guy that they coached at the Senior Bowl. And by all accounts, really, really liked all of his skills. He looked great at the combine. His tape is really good overall. There's some inconsistencies, but the upside is clearly there. But worst case scenario, Justin Herbert gets taken at, I'm trying to think the absolute worst case scenario would be like pick 12? He's going to be, in best case scenario, he's a top 5 pick. So, he's going to have incredible draft capital, and he's going to get a chance to be the quarterback for his team. And so in one quarterback leagues, the value is so much lower on these quarterbacks that I almost pass just because of that alone. But if I could get a guy that I think will have more rushing upside than people realize, he is a very talented athlete. I do think he'll get, 300-400 rushing yards a season, which will be a big boost to your fantasy team. And I think he'll also have a lot of talented teams that are close that would be willing to pick him. So, I'm looking at the Chargers that might be willing to pick him. They're, if they take him, there's a lot of weapons that are ready for him to be successful early. There's an outside shot, even though they just spent money on Teddy. You could see the Carolina Panthers doing it. I don't think they will. It's a possibility. Oakland Raiders could. They got Josh Jacobs there. I think they have a million picks, so I see them taking a Henry Ruggs, trying to get Jerry Jeudy, somebody like that in this class. So overall, or Miami would be the least exciting for this season. But I think long-term, when you look at all of the assets that they have, they're going to get an opportunity to build a good offensive line. There's already a good receiving core with Devontae Parker and Preston Williams there, and Mike Gesicki at tight end. They're going to get more running backs in there. So I think most of the reasonable scenarios for him are pretty favorable. And so I think at this point, it's a pretty solid and safe pick.
In Superflex, are you taking him top 5?
Probably. Okay. It's locked in Burrow and Tua at 1 and 2. 3 is where it gets really interesting. If I had to do it today, those running backs are real tempting. It would be tough. I'm going to plead the 5th for now because hopefully I don't have any of my league mates watching, but I'm going to plead the 5th on that one for now because I'm really, really torn on where I would go at 3. But it's very likely that I would strongly consider Justin Herbert at 3. Okay,
so let me ask you about Herbert specifically in terms of his inconsistencies that you mentioned on tape, and I as well have my issues with the inconsistent play from Justin Herbert where, I kind of see, man, I hate this comp, but like Mitch Trubisky will like flash and he'll look like really good for like a drive. And then the next drive is just like awful. He's like horrendous. So not saying that Herbert is Mitch Trubisky, but like those are the inconsistencies that I saw from Justin Herbert. And, my best friend is an Oregon fan, and he's called him Herbert the Sherbert for like the past like 3 years. So I'm actually really aggravated with Justin Herbert already just because of him. But what
does that even mean, Herbert the Sherbert?
I don't know. That's what he's been calling him, and it's annoying. He made like a picture of like sherbet ice cream with Justin Herbert's head on it, and it was like kind of green too. He sent that in our group chat, and I was like, whatever. But anyway, so I'm not really in on Justin Herbert as my quarterback 3 in this class.
Okay.
And actually, I would prefer Jalen Hurts specifically because I think the rushing upside much more so than Herbert specifically, but also like Tua and Joe Burrow. I think Hurts has that, and I think Hurts is also a much better passer than a lot of people give him credit for. But Herbert, nothing that he did this past season changed my outlook of him at all. He didn't impress me more than I thought that he would, but he didn't kill his stock at all either. Like he was just kind of like there. He just kind of like did his thing, and I don't know if that's like how you view it or anything like that, but how concerned are you with the inconsistent play? And do you think that he's going to be more so of a project type quarterback than a guy who can immediately come in and make an impact?
It's a good question. Overall, I think as frustrated as I was with some of the inconsistencies, we would see guys where he would, way overthrow players. We would see times where he would just make some foolish decisions on some drives. All of that said, when you look at arm strength, which is a little overrated, but arm strength is clearly there. The athleticism is clearly there. And he seems to be a very intelligent guy as well. So the big thing is, can he be accurate enough? That's really what it's going to come down to. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Josh Allen, where, he's got a real strong arm. He's a good athlete. Will he be able to be consistent enough on his passes to be good for your fantasy football teams? And I think that's kind of where that's what we got to figure out is he that guy? I think he could put up very similar numbers to a Josh Allen, and you'll be frustrated at times because you see what the ceiling is, and is he actually going to reach that ceiling? But I don't think we're going to see his floor either. I think we're going to get similar to what we got in college, where there are some very, very good times. There's some times, but he has enough athleticism and rushing ability to be able to compensate for that and still get you a solid, point total week in and week out, but he'll also have some of those really big weeks.
I like it. Yeah, I think that was a pretty good explanation for that. And I had never considered Josh Allen as a solid comp for that, but that makes a lot of sense. I like that one. And he's gained a lot of value too. So I mean, hey, if Herbert's going to be Josh Allen and he's going to gain a whole bunch of value coming into year 3,
yeah, that would work out for him.
Yep, absolutely. So last pick here, 408. And man, Darrington Evans. I'm gonna have to let Ray know that Darrington Evans has been a 3rd, 4th round pick in these drafts because he was having to deal with him in the 2nd round last week, and that's just really funny to me.
He's frustrated.
Jordan Love went here at 404. Cole Kmet went at 403. Just to let you know.
Yeah.
But 408 here, Lynn Bowden, Jake Fromm, Colin Johnson, Fan Jefferson, Thaddeus Moss, Adam Troutman, Jacob Eason, Harrison Bryant. Again, we're still in this quarterback tight end little phase right here of the drafts. Isaiah Hodgins, Michael Warren. I can keep going down here unless you already have your pick.
No, I think I got my guy. So overall, I would heavily. I'll talk about some of the guys I'd consider, and then I'll tell you who I'm actually going to take. I would consider Troutman here. I think he is one of. There's 3 guys that I really like, and he's one of the 3. So I would definitely consider him here. I'd consider Michael Warren here. I think he is an underrated running back in this class. It's going to come down to draft capital for him, but he's basically, if you go watch his tape, it's really funny because people love Zach Moss, love Zach Moss. Now there's some haters too, but people love Zach Moss. Mm-hmm. Michael Warren is basically the same player. He's almost identical to Zach Moss. They play very, very similar. Their strengths are the same strengths. Their weaknesses are the same weaknesses. The only difference is you're going to be able to get Michael Warren like 2 rounds later. So I think he is a very good value if you're wanting like just a solid running back that is going to probably stick on a team and be a forever backup, which I think, unfortunately for the Moss truthers, that might be the case with Moss as well. But I know they won't like that. I'm going to get yelled at. But I think he's a very, very solid running back that will be on your team for a long time and could be a spot starter here and there. But the guy I'm going to end up going with is I'm going to go with Van Jefferson out of Florida. He's had an interesting kind of path to relevance. He was an Ole Miss guy and wasn't getting a ton of playing time. And so obviously that's concerning often when it's like, why isn't this dude playing? He must not be that good. Well, we saw how good the receiving core was at Ole Miss with DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, and then they had Dawson Knox at tight end as well. So it adds a little context and it makes more sense as to why he wasn't quite getting the playing time that you would think somebody of his caliber would get. Went to Florida, had some flashes, showed some things. Really, really good route runner. Where he really kind of rose up boards was the Senior Bowl. And we've seen that quite a bit lately with guys that have really blossomed in the NFL. We saw that specifically with 2 seniors last year, Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin. Weren't necessarily huge names before that, and kind of saw their stock rise. And a lot of that was getting the opportunity to really look at these guys at the Senior Bowl. And so Van Jefferson popped a little bit with that. He didn't pop enough for me to be like, oh, I'm gonna like reach for him in like the 3rd round or the 2nd round. But I saw enough on tape. I saw enough athleticism. I saw enough separation. I saw enough ability that he's more of an upside play. And in the 4th round, for the most part, that's really kind of what you're looking for, is what guy presents the most upside there, because it's not very often that your 4th round pick hits. And I think he has enough upside for me that I'm willing to take that risk.
So my one question for you on Van Jefferson, I mean, we're talking about 4th round picks here, and you just said it. There's not probable that they're really going to hit, but Jefferson is going to be 24 coming into the 2020 NFL season. He's 23 now. He turns 24 in July. Is that at all a concern for you?
It's less concerning at wide receiver than it is at running back, just because we know how long they can last. And we've seen a decent amount of seniors come in and do pretty well lately, like I mentioned with Deebo and McLaurin. And another guy that really popped in, there's some similarities. I don't think he's quite as good as an athlete, but he could be another late round sleeper from wide receiver sleeper from the SEC. Darius Slayton was a guy that I really, really liked last year. I was really, really a big fan of. Fortunately, I have him in like almost legitimately every league, which is beautiful because he really popped. But when I'm looking at these late round guys, and this will be post draft, but I'm looking for two of these 3 things to be true. At least 2 of the 3. And if all 3 are true, then I definitely target them as a sleeper. But one, did I really like their tape? Were there skills on tape that I think translate well to the next level? 2, did they test well at the combine? Do they have numbers that are conducive to players at their size, their skill set, where they're likely going to be playing? Did he do well there? And 3, wow, I just blanked. The path to relevancy. Is there a path on that current team where you could see a realistic situation outside of saying like, well, everyone gets hurt and then they'll have a chance? Like, is there a realistic chance for them to be able to move up the depth chart where they're at? If 2 of those 3 things are true, chances are I'm willing to take a chance on them in the 4th, 5th, 6th round of rookie drafts. If all 3 of those things are true, then I'm targeting them in the 4th round every single time. And I think for Van Jefferson, I liked his tape enough. He didn't necessarily pop, but he had good numbers, testing numbers. And so we'll see what happens with the opportunity, but I think he's going to be one that I'm willing to take a flyer on more than most.
All righty. Yeah. 4th round. I mean, you can't really go wrong there. And like, I love those 3 bullet points, I guess we'll say 3 check boxes. for late round flyers there. It's a fantastic way to put that, and to really, try to find targets in the late rounds. Guys like Kenny Golladay and stuff like that come to mind in terms of late round hits. Slayton was another great example that you gave, that seems to be trending in that right territory after the second half of last season. But so that's going to wrap up both of those 4-round rookie mocks. Garrett, thank you so much for hopping on here, and I'm going to give you some time to just plug away, let the people know where they can find you, what you got going on, and let them know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're going to find all my work at the Dynasty Nerds. I do the podcast. I'm one of the 3 hosts for that. But I also do a lot of stuff. We're developing a bunch of new tools, we're releasing this, basically it's a nerd score is what we're calling it, but it's basically the tape score. So that way we can put some numerical values on exactly what we're seeing on tape. So that way it kind of helps bridge the gap, because film guys get, and it's a fair criticism of like, well, you say you like them. How much do you like them? What does that really mean? So this kind of helps like put a numerical value to exactly what we're seeing on tape. And so help keep us a little more consistent and more accountable long-term. So that's something that we're working on and we've developed, and we're excited to get that released as well. And then we do a show on Wednesday nights called Film Nerds. And it's basically just myself, Jared Wackerly, and Nick Whalen, 3 of us just sitting down. All 3 of us have a playing or coaching background. And so just like we would do in the locker room, just kind of sitting around talking about tape, seeing some of the traits and stuff that we're seeing, and we talk about it out loud. And so that's kind of a fun show to help you grow in your understanding of, when I watch tape, I can tell who's fast and I can tell who just broke a tackle, but, I don't understand like some of the nuances of what makes one player good and what makes one player not. We help try to bridge that gap there for everyone. And then last but not least, on Twitter, at Dynasty Price.
All righty. Yeah, fantastic stuff. And hey, that nerd score is going to be really good for a lot of the analytics people who hate that, film people just are like unaccountable for all the stuff that they say.
Yep, exactly.
And all the subjectiveness that goes into film. Speaking as an analytics person.
Yep. Nope. I get it. I appreciate both. I'm not as gifted analytically, but I appreciate the numbers that get produced from it. And so those do go into like my final evaluations. But growing up playing football, playing college ball and stuff like that, like I grew up grinding tape. So that's my go-to. But I think if you're not at least willing to listen to what some of the analytics are saying, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So I lean one way, but I definitely appreciate both.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thank you all for tuning in and watching today's stream, whether that be on Twitch or Facebook, or if you're watching this on YouTube after it has been broadcasted. So please make sure that if you're on YouTube to like, subscribe, leave a comment for Garrett to find out and give him some feedback on some of his player stuff. Definitely do all that stuff and hit Garrett up on Twitter as well too. And make sure that you subscribe on YouTube. Like I said, we got other DLF TV shows like the DLF Mailbag. I know after the NFL draft, Ray is going to get back into some rookie film study. We got some more stuff coming in the works for DLF YouTube TV. So make sure you guys are subscribed and paying attention to all the stuff that we're going to be dropping as we move into the summer, because we really got nothing else better to do. We're spending all this quarantine time. So thank you guys for watching, for tuning in today. Thank you, Garrett, once again for joining me. And we will catch you guys later and next week with another episode of Drafting Lessons. So see ya.